Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? How's the Lit Festival so far? It's awesome. Yeah. Oh, excellent. Okay. So I'm going to briefly introduce myself and then our esteemed panelists. And also, my name is Stephen G. Fullwood. I am the exhibition coordinator for Marking Time, Art in the Age of Mass Incarceration. And this is Nicole Fleetwood, who is the curator of that exhibition, which is upstairs in 3 galleries. It is the most extraordinary exhibition that you will ever see in your life. How about that? We're looking at the U.S. prison's impact on visual art, and you will see 40 artists and 131 objects taking apart and thinking through what it means to be incarcerated. And for those who weren't incarcerated, they're exposing the carceral system for what it is. Okay? I want to introduce our wonderful, wonderful panelists. Rachel Cargle. She's an activist, entrepreneur, and philanthropic innovator. She's the founder of the Loveland Group, a family of companies including Elizabeth's Books Shop and Writing Center, a literary space that celebrates marginalized voices, and The Great Unlearn. I love that. I love that because we've learned so many terrible things, so we need to unlearn them, right? An adult learning platform that centers the teaching of BIPOC thinkers. In 2018, she founded the Loveland Foundation, offering free access to mental health care for Black women and girls. Cargle is a regular contributor to The Cultured magazine, at most, and The Cut, and her work has been featured in the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the New Yorker. Welcome, Rachel Cargle. And Nicole R. Fleetwood, who I have a lot of things to say about, but I have this written thing here that I'm going to read. Okay, she's the inaugural James Weldon Johnson Professor of Media, Culture, and Communication in the Steinhardt School at New York University. She's a MacArthur Fellow, a writer, curator, and art critic whose interests are contemporary Black diasporic art and visual culture, photography studies, art and public practice, performance studies, gender and feminist studies, Black cultural history, creative nonfiction, prison abolition and carceral studies, and poverty studies. Yes. Okay, you understand? She is the author of Marking Time. You hold up your book there. Yes, Marking Time, which is the same title of the exhibition I just told you to go see, but see it after this exhibition. And she, among her many awards, she is the National Book Critics Award in Criticism, the John Hope Franklin Publication Prize of the American Studies Association, the Suzanne M. Glassick Humanities Book Prize for Interdisciplinary Scholarship, and both the Charles Rufus Maury Award in Art History and the Frank Jewett Mather Award in Art Criticism. Ladies and gentlemen, Nicole Fleetwood. This is an Ohio reunion here. Toledo, Akron, Hamilton. Yes, we're all here. Ohio's in the house. Ohio, we go wherever we want, and do whatever we want. We are free to be anywhere in the universe.
Is anyone else from Ohio? Is anyone else from Ohio?
Oh, yes. Awesome, awesome. So without further ado, Rachel is going to read a little bit from her book, and then they're going to engage a conversation and just sit back and enjoy, okay?
And a book signing afterwards upstairs.
Right, sorry. And there's a book signing upstairs. In the bookstore or?
In the lobby.
It's probably the Langston Hughes lobby. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be with Nicole having this particular conversation. My book came out just a few weeks ago, so I'm still in the honeymoon phase with the book, and the title is A Renaissance of Our Own, a memoir and manifesto on reimagining. And so this conversation is going to be a lot about reimagining, how reimagining shows up in both of our work. And I'm going to start by reading what my book starts with, which is a manifesto. And then I'm going to read a bit of the author's note, which I've heard from my readers is their favorite part, which I'm excited about that. So I'm going to read, and I'm excited to dive into this conversation.
She's reading my copy.
Yes. I forgot my own book to this event. Manifesto. I am who I say I am. I shape my existence with walk confidently with the understanding that my choices are aligned. My place in the world is sacred. No one knows me better than I know me. I honor and celebrate the ways my chosen self unfolds as I learn, grow, and shift. My beliefs are rooted in my trust that my current self, younger self, and older self are all partners on my path to well-being. I surround myself with people who affirm safety, kindness, and joy. I maintain boundaries that remind me and others of my needs and my desire to be well. I show up with my very best as a daughter, lover, auntie, neighbor, and friend. I hold tight to my belief in revolution. Justice is not a passive pursuit, but one braided into every way I show up in the world. I name my privileges, being educated, financially secure, neurotypical, able-bodied, and cisgendered, and I use them as platforms to fight for the well-being of others. It is an honor to learn my way through this lifetime. I commit myself to my curiosity and interests, gaining new and deeper knowledge not only of myself, but also of my unique interests like art and the history of Black feminism are always a worthy use of my time. I have found my work in the world to be rooted in using my genius as an activist, writer, entrepreneur, and philanthropic innovator. I do my work in a way that aligns with my values and desires. Rest is a right I hold as a human being, knowing that my best self is my highest service. I tend generously to my rest and healing, mind, body, and soul. I give myself permission to let go of perfectionism and invest energy into simply being inspired by the living. So that is the manifesto. I'm going to read the author's note because I think it speaks a bit to it. Dear reader, my entire life is a testament to reimagining. What was given to me when I was a child was a life defined by limitations and rules. What was expected of me, what was offered to me, was barely enough to fit in the palm of my hand. I was raised by a single mother with a physical disability. We lived in government-subsidized housing and depended on welfare. By the time I was in middle school, both my older sisters were battling addiction, and my mother had become the primary caregiver for their children. As you can imagine, expectations for my own future were dismal. While I did not have a name for this feeling at the time, I think we would call it ambition, I craved a different life from the one I had been born into. So I began to reimagine something more for myself. Each step I took away from where I started and toward my vision of a different life led me closer to the place I am now. Today, I am a public academic and the CEO of a successful seven-figure business founded on social good, a business I manifested from a dream I refused to ignore. But it's not where I started. I was once an unhappily married woman living in a small town, trying to convince herself that the voice she was hearing inside of her was of value. Luckily, I listened to that voice, and the work I do now is rooted in knowledge sharing and advocating for the rights of Black women and other marginalized groups. I have an online community of nearly 2 million people from all over the world who have found value in my voice and leadership. And most important, I live a life surrounded by those I love and who love me back and who provide nourishment and goodness to my soul. It's a life that for a long time I had only imagined, but then I unearthed the tools to bring this reimagining to life. And so, as it often happens, when we experience life-changing breakthroughs, we want to share them with others. Moments that offer an exciting new lens through which we can view the world can push us to evangelize, to insist that others also consider this new way of living. Perhaps for you, that breakthrough was a college course that gave you a new framework for considering your place in society, which I'm sure you've done for many of your students. Maybe it was a conversation with your grandmother that uncovered a family truth, shifting what you understood about your lineage and yourself. Or perhaps, as for me, it was after years of trying, testing, and pushing back against what was supposed to be, discovering the beauty of what could be when we give ourselves permission to sample a version of life on the other side of impossible. These realizations, these moments, these experiences will often both break and fortify us, and the result is that we are never the same. We are reoriented in the world, invited to take the brave step to reimagine. As you'll learn in these pages, I've had several such moments through my life, some subtle, some earth-shattering. Each demanded that I reconsider what I understood about both myself and the world around me. It started when I was a young girl and I began to question what was being taught to me in the church. Moving into my teen years, I started to wonder what life might look like outside of the cycle of struggle and survival my family was trapped in. As an adult, I questioned the shoulds that society often places upon women around relationships, careers, and childbearing. As an activist, I confronted the whitewashed feminist movement I'd originally been steeped in. Confronting the ideas and ways of being we find comforting or familiar is no small task. It takes courage and vulnerability to look around at the world we are living in and say, I want something different. To some, our reimagining the world might feel like a threat, an invalidation of their own truths. To ourselves, the reimagining might feel like a betrayal of a truth we previously were committed to. To the world, our reimagining might seem like a risky, even dangerous act, since maintaining the status quo is considered both honorable and respectable. I stand as living proof of a life reimagined. I stand as living proof that a life reimagined is possible, necessary even, for any person willing to do the work, willing to make peace with the unknown, and believe wholeheartedly that they are worth the effort. This reimagining has been a permission slip, allowing me to explore my fullest potential and most authentic self. My hope is that it becomes a permission slip for you as well, and that together as a community, we continue to push past any limit that threatens our freedoms. The more we approach our existence in this way, the stronger our reimagining muscles becomes, and the more powerful the reimagine. See you on the other side.
Beautiful, Rachel. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Rachel and I were talking before we came on stage, and I said to Rachel that I always start my talk saying, may my work be in service of love and liberation. And I feel like we share that commitment. Incarceration has restructured my family and my hometown of Hamilton, Ohio, in Southwest Ohio. Countless relatives have been arrested and detained. Some have been convicted and sentenced, while others have been held indefinitely and then let go. Studies of the rise and the growth of the carceral state offer insightful explanations of what many of us experience in our own communities: the mass removal of family members, neighbors, and friends, along with the permanent stigma on imprisoned people and their families. As I came of age in the late 1980s, people around me, mainly young Black teens, but also older women and men, were shipped off to prison at such a high rate that their sudden disappearance and long-term absence became the norm. Boys my age who went to school with me were there and then gone, some never to return. They became invisible to us and hard to reach because of all the mechanisms the carceral state uses to separate imprisoned people from their families and communities. We had no words to describe the utter devastation, the despair. Opening our local newspaper was often cause for pain and embarrassment, as photographs of people we knew seen in handcuffs were all too common. Often, these were images of Black children and teenagers, some from my own block, infamously referred to as super predators in the 1990s by journalists and politicians alike. At the same time, there were other images being produced about mass incarceration, images that rarely made the news and had little or no public circulation. They offered different interpretations of prisons and their impact. These were not journalistic, scholarly, or legal documents. They were a diverse assortment of artworks and illustrations that came from inside the prisons themselves. Studio photos, handmade greeting cards, drawings, and other pieces of art made by incarcerated people. Relatives in prison sent home graphite drawings and birthday cards designed by incarcerated artists. Some facilities permitted us to take photographs together when we visited our relatives and friends. The visiting rooms where we sat with our imprisoned loved ones often displayed paintings, miniatures, and sculptures made by an artist's warehouse there. These objects were not new forms of prison art, but as the size of the prison population boomed, the visual culture of mass incarceration grew along with it. Marking Time grows out of a decade of research and programming. I have interviewed more than 70 people, including imprisoned artists, teachers, nonprofit administrators, prison staff, activists, and the loved ones and relatives of imprisoned people. The book and exhibition center prisons and contemporary art and culture and the robust world of art making inside U.S. prisons. I set out to engage the politics of this art making in prisons and more expansively art as politics in an era of extensive human caging and other forms of carceral power. How has the colossal reach of the prison industrial complex shaped contemporary art institutions and art making? And how does visual art help to reveal the depths of the devastation caused by our nation's punishment system? In one of the paintings upstairs, Ronnie Goodman's 2008 painting, San Quentin Arts and Corrections Art Studio. The artist is alone at work in a studio. The self-portrait shows him inside a cavernous space of multi-storied walls and beamed ceilings. We see him in profile from the knees up, dressed all in blue and bent slightly forward, studying a print. On the walls, dwarfing him and above his reach, are portraits, landscape paintings, and still life renditions. The details of the work, the light, the height, and the open floor plan all suggest an idyllic scene for the creation of art. Goodman made this painting while he was incarcerated at San Quentin and taking art classes run through William James Association, a nonprofit organization that provides classes in California prisons. The prison studio in Goodman's painting is a space of imaginative possibility, as well as a place constrained by his incarceration and the layered history of the carceral state. His painting is a reflection on the conditions under which art is made within prisons, while also reimagining the space. His painting is an example of what I call carceral aesthetics, ways of envisioning and crafting art that reflects the conditions of imprisonment. Every year, incarcerated people create millions of paintings, drawings, sculptures, greeting cards, collages, and other visual materials that circulate in prisons, between incarcerated people and their loved ones, in private collections, and more recently in the public domain. The project highlights the compulsion to make, to create, and to produce meaning under brutal and austere circumstances in the larger setting of the carceral state. There are lessons here developed by people in prison about how to create, to forge relations, and to embody and represent one's life under unimaginable conditions. And so we learn about a society that relies on punitive confinement as a solution to a myriad of social, economic, ecological, and health crises. Marking Time has been made possible by the transformative vision of freedom, justice, and belonging of an amazing group of currently and formerly incarcerated artists and their loved ones and allies. They inspire me every day. Our freedom is interdependent. Prison, indefinite detention, parole, concentration camps exist in as much as we allow them to. I write this in honor of Ronnie Goodman, the artist whose painting I described. He passed away in a housing encampment in San Francisco's Mission District on August 7th, 2020. May he rest in peace. Rachel and I met actually when she visited the exhibition Marking Time.
Let me tell you what happened.
You're in Ohio.
I was in Ohio. Yes, we're both Ohio girls, and I was in Ohio. Whenever I'm in Ohio, I'm missing New York inevitably. I'm like reading something about New York. I'm watching a film set in New York, and you had a article in the Atlantic, and so I was reading an article in the Atlantic about Marking Time, and the second I put the newspaper or the magazine down, I went online and I searched her up, and I reached out and I said, I have to know you, and I have to see, like, when can I see this? And she said, it's at MoMA PS1 right now, and I think I probably got to New York the next day, and you were in town, and so I got to go and meet Nicole and see the actual exhibition there, and it meant so much when we both realized that we were both from Ohio. And we, there's many incredible literary voices from Ohio, many incredible musical performers from Ohio, but one of the things that we mentioned was how as someone from Ohio, our worlds were so small. The that's biggest for me is that I had never heard other accents. You were either black or white. You might have, you might speak Spanish maybe. In Spanish class I might have heard an accent, but it wasn't until in New York City that I had ever really heard a Caribbean accent. It wasn't until, into my 20s that I understood how big the world could be. And I think it's so interesting that coming from Ohio and feeling like we're in a small world, and what you and I had to reimagine to say, you know what, I'm interested in what else is possible, what else is out there. Not saying that Ohio isn't a place to be, but just interested in, I've been using the language, I've always been deeply seduced by possibility. Like, it really pulls me. I want to know, it's worth all of the risks for me to know what is possible. And
Can I just interrupt you?
yes.
Because my very favorite quote is by Emily Dickinson. I dwell in possibility.
Oh, yes, I do
I
there.
say that all the time. I dwell in possibility.
Yes.
And you said reimagining, and I was saying reimagining, and then you were saying words that, like, when you don't have the words for something.
Yeah.
And for you, it was
Yeah.
remission. And
Yes.
for me, it was despair.
Yeah. And Ohio, being from such a small space, both of us reimagining where we wanted to be, and then for you to go back home, and for you to go into a space that doesn't allow much possibility. My first question for you is about reimagining, and even about imagination as a tool. How it has been utilized. I touch my hands because I think of it physically, like this tool that we're using to make considerations of what else is possible. Can you talk about this tool of reimagination and how you saw it show up in your work, and if you think the prisoners saw it as a tool?
I love that question, and what I want to say though is every time I talk to Rachel, my sense of possibility expands. And so I want to say that you were such a gift to be in conversation with. Like, every time you and I speak, I learn something new about myself and what's imaginable, and so thank you for that. And that's what a friendship is, right? A friendship is making our world more expansive and knowing that we're deeply recognized also. I love the idea that imagination has tools, because I think you and I were talking about how imagination is this space where this bridge between our interior lives and the greater world, that so much of how people interact with us is based on the shell, right, of what's visible. And it is through imagination and creativity that we can all the things that are happening inside that we can project and connect in really amazing ways. But I often think of that in very kind of abstraction, but you said tools, and I'm like, there are very concrete ways that we can not only envision but make possible. What drew me to this project was first my own family's experience with grief and despair, and then the very concrete ways that my cousins would connect with us, which was often through sending photographs of themselves in prison. And then going into prisons and seeing all the ways that incarcerated people innovate. Like, they create the very tools for projecting these expansive worlds, right? And that type of innovation is, to me, what it means to practice freedom even in the most austere, unimaginable situations. And this project, for me, is not about something new. I do truly believe that the capacity of human beings is limitless in terms of what we can imagine. AI is an example of that. It's not always used in the most, it can be used in all kinds of ways, right? But what I do truly believe is that the moment a person is put in a cage is the moment that they start envisioning freedom and creating freedom, right? And so that we will find the tools for freedom, right? That we are not meant to be caged, captive, captured in any kinds of ways whatsoever. And so that what's core to human experience is innovating around our own freedom. Juneteenth, in the ways that we continue to celebrate Juneteenth me is in deep recognition of that.
I'm so moved by not just the artwork that is coming from those who are in prison, but also your curation of them. It's so thoughtful and it's so kind and it's so, you seem so in partnership. I don't feel like this is I'm a curator and let me show their work. It's, I care and I want you to be seen. Right now, I was speaking with a few other friends about what community means. We kind of were asking each other what community means. And the language that I feel true to me right now is seeing and being seen, is being able to like really see people as who I feel I'm in community with, who are vulnerable with me, who are honest with me, and then to be seen by others, for people to look at me and say, girl, you need to figure this out, or look at me and say, here's what I'm celebrating about you. Even the words that you said to me earlier is materials for me understanding myself, is material for me calibrating myself. I'm interested, this work is obviously the way that you have seen not just the art, but the artist. I'm interested in how you perhaps were seen, how you felt seen, what came out of this project for you personally.
And can I connect that to your work and your journey?
Sure.
Yeah. So, because I've been reading A Renaissance of Our Own this weekend, and it's so amazing for me because it's so familiar to me, like Black girl growing up in Ohio, single mom, growing up, working poor, growing up in a church that offered me a moral framework that seemed to like answer everything until then I got out in the big world and and had to ask some of my own questions, right, and navigate my own relationship to that kind of spiritual practice and feminism and all these other things that come up, and they were speaking to me so deeply. And I feel like we both learned care practices rooted in our own home life, and what I think is the incredible ingenuity of Black women and femmes, which is to figure out solutions for our family lives, our communities, and the like. And so what I want to say for me that I feel like connects very much to your work is like early on when I started researching Marking Time and I was talking to someone about it, they said, you talk about your cousins with such care, your cousins are in prison, but there's a formality about how you talk about other incarcerated artists. And I said, okay, then my commitment to this project is to love everyone in this project in the way that I love my cousins, to practice a type of ethical love, and to not put anyone in this project, to not write about anyone that I could not say that I love, whether I've ever seen them before or not. That how do I enact love as a practice of justice, as a practice of expanding my own idea of community. And I want to say that as I'm sitting here, I'm shaking because it so much connects to your idea of the Love Land Project. And this is, which I'd love Rachel to talk more about, but it was partly a birthday wish, right? Where you wanted to expand the possibility of Black women and girls having mental health care access, right? And so you created something called the Love Land Project. That again is rooted in this idea of love and liberation. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So it was true. So it was a birthday. I was a nanny here in Harlem, and I was attending Columbia University, which is when I had access to therapy for the first time, because it was students could have access to the therapist on campus. And I had this breakthrough moments where I was like, wow. I think I probably first thought, I wish my sisters had this opportunity, and then it broadened to I wish more Black women had this opportunity, just to be seen and to be heard. And my therapist was a Black woman, and so there was also a particular way that I felt understood with those sessions. And I always call it was like a Black market therapy fund at first, because I didn't know what it meant to be in the world of philanthropy. I didn't know what it meant to build out something, but I started to raise money, and I think I raised $10,000 in the first 24 hours that I put it out to my followers online, and I probably had about 10,000 followers at the time. And I was like, oh, people, not only are people invested, but they're invested now. There's an urgency to it. And over the next, I think it was 6 months, it grew into $250,000, and then I got so lucky. A wonderful woman named Charlene Kemmler, who is a philanthropic advisor 75,000 hours of therapy to Black women and girls. And it's a beautiful trifecta because we're also in relationship with making sure that they're connected with Black therapists. And so we've been able to pay out over $2 million to Black therapists for their work in our community.
The average donation is like,
Yes, it's just $5. It's just $5. And it's really beautiful because we do not accept grants, and we also have a very specific rubric for who we take money from. And so we have been able to really grow out this expectation of how people are in relationship with us. One, not getting grants means, because when you receive grants, there's usually guidelines that you have to follow and reports that you have to make to whoever it is that gave you this grant. And us not accepting grants is rooted in the fact that for each person who comes and applies, we have one of the big things that's important for me for the foundation is we don't have an application. If you are a Black woman or girl, you get on the wait list. I hate the way that Black people have to relay their trauma as a means to deserve something. I didn't want there to have to be an essay to say what happened to who and why you should get it. You just get it. And also I hate, as a Black girl who grew up on welfare and saw my mom jumping through all of the hoops, I was trained on what to say to who to make sure we still got our benefits. I know some of you can relate. And so I didn't want that feeling. And so also we had no cap on how much money you could make, because there's some doctors who are making six figures who are sending all of their money back to Jamaica, all of their money back to wherever they're from to take care of their families, and so they also don't have money for therapy. So the Western idea that your income is a representation of how you can live in the world didn't relate to me either. So it's been a really beautiful opportunity to see my community and to give people the opportunity to consider what healing looks like and what it could mean. And people always say, are you going to expand it to other groups? And I feel like I can make the most impact with Black women. We are the bedrock of our homes, our neighborhoods, our organizations, our communities. And I figured when Black women are healing, that will be, it'll ripple. And one of the best news that we got recently is that the age group of our cohorts is continuing to rise. So what that means for me is that, I'm 34, and so a lot of the people who were hearing about me were either my age or maybe a bit younger who were in my community. But this means that, as our numbers rise to the average age is about moving up into the 40s, moving up into the 50s, that means we're telling our aunties about it, we're telling our mothers about it, we're telling our older sisters and our cousins about it. And so it's really, it was a reimagining for me to say, how do I serve my community without feeling like I have to jump over the hoops that bureaucracy, U.S. bureaucracy does in prison. The bureaucracy within the prison system is nauseating and heartbreaking, and if you've ever dealt with it at all in any capacity, it's really really a terrible experience. But I'm grateful for the people who are able to get care, and because I know that the prison system is part of the reasons that we're all doing a lot of things, which is grieving, one of the big ones. You mentioned grief, and I'm going through my own grief from my personal life. My mother passed away in November, and it's changed me, and it's changed my understanding of grief. Now every person I look at and I say, who are they grieving? What are they grieving? And the prison system is it really is a grief space. It's a grief space of the people who have lost someone for an amount of time, but also I'm interested to know how grief came up in your conversations, or you personally.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this, and I have no idea what time it is.
Me neither.
So
we have a little bit. We're good.
2:24. Okay, so at but I often feel like it gets misread as this aspirational or triumphant story about people getting out of prison and becoming famous artists. And as I was telling Rachel just earlier, next month Alan is going back to prison. You know, we got him out of prison. He was in prison for 21 years, age 18 to 39, and at 48 he's going to go back to prison. So the grief and sorrow, I think what I've learned is never, and I think equanimity teaches me this, never to succumb, right? Because I think when you succumb to grief, then it becomes something else. Grief to me is process, right? But to succumb to a state of just, despair is something else, So I, again, dwell in possibility, right? Also I have to say that Alan going back to prison is not a failure or a fault, but it is a loss, but it is not a failure. We have no one in the family has given up now. But the way we will show up is going to be different than we did before.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Okay, but I wanted to say, I was thinking if I had enough time to say what I want to say, because one of the things you saying kind of like grief as a process, but it also makes me think of grief as a practice, in the same way that we think of liberation as a practice. And I want to talk and think about imagination as a practice, because I think after childhood it gets lost, this need to, we're often encouraged to dream as a child, draw something on this paper, tell me a story, and then something about that shifts either into capitalism, where the only reason we're imagining is in order to produce and have this outcome. And so I talk to many of my friends who say, oh, I haven't daydreamed in a while, I haven't just let myself imagine, or even the word fantasy, it's so connected to sexuality, but I think I fantasize about a lot of things, often what this could be, what this could feel like, what this could look like. And I hope that through your work and through my work, there can be this cultivation of a practice of imagining, a practice of reimagining, to use it as a tool and as I'll even go as far as to say ritual, something that we infuse into how we show up in our work, in the way we love, in the way we care for ourselves, in the way that we are creative, this practice of reimagining. And it's been really beautiful to see, these artists.
actually about imagination. I don't know if anyone in the room has gone to see the Black Power Nap show at MoMA. It just recently closed last month. It was basically about how can we imagine or dream if we cannot rest. And so my question is kind of for the both of you as people and women who are so busy lives, especially dealing with work that you deal with that's very draining, I can imagine. How do you rest and how do you incorporate imagination and sleep into your routine and schedule?
Yeah, I write about rest a bit, but the way that I've been doing it, and I speak to it in my book about coming to my highest values, coming to know my highest values, and one of the really powerful ways that highest values shows up is that it allows me to communicate my needs and my desires and my expectations to people. And so, and oftentimes when people know about me and my highest values, they actually interact with me in those ways before I even have to discuss it. A really good example of that is, at my company, everyone knows that ease, abundance, and opportunity are at the root of how I want to move through the world. So when my lawyer gets a contract, she's looking for the legal things, but she's also saying, is this going to be uneaseful for Rachel? What do we need to include into this to make sure that she's taken care of in the way that she has stated to us that she wants to take care of? So, telling people what you need or taking care of yourself and expecting people to reflect that. And this has to do with rest. So my team knows that I don't want to do an event the day I fly in. My team knows, all of these types of things that make it clear of what I need is one of the easiest ways that I get rest, knowing that I have communicated and I have become clear about my needs, allowing me to have the space to take care of myself. So knowing my highest values and calibrating myself and my community to it, because when you know your highest values, my friends aren't gonna call me and be like, Rachel, do you wanna take a trip tomorrow? I'm like, that's not useful for me. I'm gonna be stressed, I gotta pack. I will see you on the other side. And instead of them being upset, it's like, oh, that's just her value, and they want to respect it. So it allows me to be in relationship with people differently and I honor that for them as well. So knowing highest values and relaying them with clarity is one of the best ways that I rest, because it lets me move through the world in a way that is true for me.
And I have to say, even if you're someone who practice self-work and do contemplation practices, I've been doing the exercises in Rachel's book, and they're so illuminating. They're really, really beautiful. So I highly recommend that you get a copy. And I'm not just plugging it because Rachel's my friend. I was like, this is really, really great. I was sharing it with my therapist. What are the exercises?
Thank you for that question.
And I would say that, I really, it isn't, I think that when Rachel was talking, I was like, the only way you can get to that place where Rachel knows her highest values is to understand our own self-worth. And that is, I've been saying this year in 2020 that I'm doing something that I used to see my grandmother do all the time, which she would call sit with herself. She would just sit with herself. And that's just sitting and having a cup of coffee and not being on anybody else's agenda. And that is really important to me. And my highest value, one of my highest values is time. So Stephen works with me as an exhibition coordinator, and so I don't let other people control my time. I'm very, 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 very insistent about managing my time, because my highest value is how I use my time, and not letting. And I think that this is what it means to honor the legacies of my relatives who were enslaved. Is I'm not on somebody else's time. And I've created my entire life around that. Bernie knows me, she's one of my good friends. I've created my entire life structured around that.
All right, I think I can speak now?
Yeah, it's your turn.
First, I want to say I'm huge fans of both of you. My name is Irvin Weathersby. I'll be here at this.
Hi,
at
Irvin.
this,
You're next,
table.
right?
I am next.
Irvin's
Stay around.
next.
Stay around. First
But
off,
we're going to first sign books and then come back down.
okay, come back now. I want to say first, huge fan. I saw your show at PS1, which was awesome. We're listening to your book. My wife and I are listening to your book right now, Rachel. My wife also was a recipient of one of the Loveland grants, and it's really important for her on her mental health journey. So I just want to say that first. I hope this question almost sounds a little redundant, but one thing that both of you were speaking about in terms of grief that are really interesting to me is how public your work is, and thinking about the compulsion for sharing. And I mean, the previous question was also about guarding yourself, but you seem both to like be really committed to kind of sharing this work and to kind of sharing the gifts that you are. How do you manage that? And I'm not thinking about rest per se, but just in terms of like that commitment to publicly talking about grief, to kind of publicly share that, look, I'm dealing with something really troubling with family members who are incarcerated, and even thinking about how some of these artists were able to kind of have their work seen and be publicized, and how that afforded them some freedom even when they are in cage, right? Thank you.
Well, about grief, I will say that I feel like my work is to think out loud, to feel out loud, to heal out loud. I feel like I don't think there's anything spectacular about me per se, but I do the things that I do out loud. I feel like that is part of the work that I do in the world. And I really want to hear from Nicole about the specifics of that question. But I will say about grief and sharing out loud, you know, I finished up my manuscript just a few weeks before my mother passed, and I read some of it to her. I wanted her to hear it, particularly a part that was about her. And so I'm sitting next to her hospital bed, and I'm reading it to her, and at the end she goes, "Wow, that was so much better than I thought it would be." And I'm like, "Okay, girl." So it made me think of how often disconnected our parents are from our work. They have no clue what we do or how we do it. And so my mom having no clue what I was writing or how I was writing it was funny to me at the moment, but in her passing, and a lot of my writing is about grief now, it is the first time I feel like my mother is in deep relationship with my work. I feel like my mom is my work. She knows what I'm writing because it's her. It's the conversations that I'm having with her now in the midst of my grief. And you talked about the joy of grief, and I have been finding some of that with my mother being a part of my work now. And I'm grateful that grief is so hard. I know you all know this, but I feel so lucky to get to do it out loud because I get constant reflections that I'm not alone, that people have felt the same way. I often say open conversations are group therapy, really, when we are willing to come and show up authentically. So I feel like the out loud is my work. It's what I've been given. I've been fortified to do it. I don't know why I can or do, but it just seems to be the flow of things, and I will stay with that. So I'm able to do it because I must.
We just got the 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
And I'll just speak really briefly because I see another hand up. I'm very deliberate about, to me, what I want to share out loud, but I am an extremely private person. So, like, for me, there is a big difference between what I activate in my personal life as a part of being in service of love and liberation. I truly believe that, and I truly believe in beloved community. But it also doesn't mean, and it's confused some of the artists I work with, because it doesn't mean that I want to be intimate friends with everyone, right? It doesn't mean that everyone's going to come into my household, right? So for me, it is practicing a kind of love that is sustainable for me, right? Which is an ethical love of recognition of humanity and viability, and may you live the life you want to live, but that doesn't mean everyone's in my intimate circle. And it is confusing to some people who think they know me, and I have to be, and I've learned, okay, this is about me being clear with my boundaries, like you're talking about your highest values, so that people know that this is not a personal thing about them either, right? But it is something that I have to constantly manage, because people do come, I'm sure Rachel gets this, Rachel has over 1 million, how many million something followers on Instagram, so I can only imagine how often people come. But people coming up to me and talking to me and assuming because they know things about me that they know me, I have to navigate that in ways that show kindness, but also is about my own boundaries. Yeah. Well, I'm already, my next book is a memoir.
what the two of you have brought into this room. I really am. My question is about, as someone who is doing work within the context of the nonprofit industrial complex, about gathering resources and how you two have both been able to gather the resources that you need to manifest what you're imagining. And for me, I am using the arts to gather healing and well-being for Black and brown communities. So really curious about your ability to call in people to contribute really small amounts, right? Because it's a privilege to give. And then the art space as well, which can be so challenging.
Well, I'll just say my experience, the Loveland Foundation really boomed in 2020. So we can all assume the space we were in when I was making these calls, and I spared no guilt to any white person I came across personally to make it very clear that one of the easiest ways that they can contribute to the way that they wanted to show up in the midst of the racial uprisings, in the midst of these conversations, was a very direct way. I don't use the language anymore because I think I've learned so much about it, but I really see it as like personal reparations. Like, this is your opportunity to pour into the well-being of these people who need to be well, especially as all of these, specifically Black men who are being killed. I'm like, there's a mother there, there's a daughter there, there's a aunt there, there's a sister there that needs to be cared for, and you need to pass your privilege on into the hands of them to be well. So I don't want my answer to be exploit white guilt, but you can take my answer however you want to.
And I love how you also have made it clear that learning anti-racist practices from Black folks and not remunerating them is exploitative, right? Like, you're asking, so like, no, this is, pay people for their time and their service and their expertise. I love your question, and I have to say there's not been one way for me around resources and access, but to stay committed and to not take no as an answer. I take no as just another opportunity. And I've had to do that. I mean, I've gotten support in the past few years, but the first 3 to 4 years of working on this project, which is over a decade, it was a bunch of no's with grants, and people have been saying very insulting things about incarcerated people. So I knew I was on everything inside of me said I was doing the work I was supposed to be doing, and so I kept that as my guide. Everything, I would wake up and I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And I kept going, and I kept finding people who did want to find ways of supporting me. And sometimes it wasn't through money, right? It was through like, oh, there's an artist in prison who's done it, and it just kept growing organically. But I never gave up on it. And I tell grad students that all the time. I said, you have to believe in the project, you have to commit to it, and not take no for an answer.
I want to say one more thing before our time is up. One of the things that have helped me not only in growing out the foundation, but in growing out a lot of things. You know, when you think when you're about to buy a red car, you're wanting to buy a red car, and then you see it all over, like, oh, that's the car I want. One part of reimagining, a practice of reimagining for me that has shown up in my work is that I really dream out the biggest possibility of that thing, and then I write it down, and as I meet people in the street, as I meet them for lunch, I say, actually, you fit into this thing that's not here yet, but let's stay in conversation. And oftentimes that entity, that person, that organization will then become a partner in building out this thing that you dreamt up already. So knowing what you want and really dreaming it out big, and so then it will come to you. You're not always searching